Hello, my name's Isla, and 3 years ago, my father kicked me out while I was 8 months pregnant. He didn't yell much, just said, "If you want to live like an adult, then go survive like one." That night, I walked into the dark with nothing but a plastic bag and a baby kicking inside me. No one stopped me, not my mother, not my sister, not even him, the man who secretly took out a loan in my name, then erased me from every family photo like I never existed. But the worst part, they never thought I'd come back. So why was I the one standing on stage 3 years later, holding the mic, while they sat frozen in their seats? Why did the girl they buried become the one they couldn't silence? Do you want to know what I said to make a room full of people hold their breath? Let me tell you. I used to believe silence was a sign of strength, that if you held your tongue long enough, people would eventually come around. But that night, sitting at the Rhodes family dining table with the Louisiana heat clinging to the back of my neck and the hum of the ceiling fan doing little to help, I learned silence could also be a weapon, and not always mine. Garrett Rhodes, my father, sat at the head of the table like he always had. Stiff posture, clean-cut gray hair, and that same watch he got from the firm back when people still called him the man who gets things done. Elora, my mother, barely touched her fork. Seraphine, my older sister, twirled her salad like she was on a magazine cover shoot and not at home with her soon-to-be shamed sister. I cleared my throat. I'm pregnant. I didn't expect cheers, but I didn't expect the table to go silent like a funeral either. Forks froze mid-air. The only sound was the old grandfather clock ticking like it was counting down the last seconds of my life as their daughter. "Excuse me?" My father's voice dropped an octave, which was always a bad sign. "I'm having a baby," I said again, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm 8 months along." The room didn't just freeze, it cracked. Seraphine's perfectly plucked eyebrows shot up, and she looked at me like I'd spat in her wine. Elora blinked slowly, her lips parted like a prayer she forgot how to say. Garrett's chair screeched back. He stood up so fast the table trembled. Then came the explosion. "You're what?" His voice could have shattered glass. 8 months? Under my roof? You lied to us. You walked around here with your head high while carrying... He couldn't even say it. I tried to breathe, tried to explain. I didn't know how to tell you. Damon, he left. I was scared. "Damn right you should be scared," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table so hard the plates rattled. "You've humiliated this family. You've lied to us, to this community, to the church. I didn't lie. He wasn't listening. His eyes were red. His jaw clenched like he was biting back every insult he knew. "You think this is just about you? About some boy who couldn't even stay? Do you understand what you've done to this family's name?" "Elora," he barked, "did you know?" My mother shook her head like a child caught sleeping in class. "No, I didn't." "Of course you didn't," he sneered. "You're too busy coddling her." Seraphine sipped her wine. She hadn't said a word, but her silence was louder than any insult. "I want her out," Garrett said finally. "Tonight." "Daddy, please." "I said tonight." And just like that, I stopped being their daughter. Elora followed me into the kitchen but said nothing. Her hand brushed mine briefly, but even that felt hollow, like she wanted to help but didn't know how, or maybe didn't want it badly enough. I packed in silence, every movement mechanical. When I walked into my childhood room, I found half my things already folded and stacked. Seraphine stood at the doorway, arms crossed. "I took the liberty," she said, voice sharp as ever. "Figured you wouldn't want to drag your shame out in front of the neighbors." I didn't respond. She walked to the desk drawer, opened it, and pulled out the silver heart locket I'd worn since I was 9, the one she gave me on my birthday. She held it for a moment, then tossed it on the bed. "You broke this family, Isla. Don't expect anyone to fix you." I looked at her, really looked at her. The perfect daughter, the shining star, the one who always did things right, who got applause while I was told to be more like your sister. I was done being compared. I zipped my bag and walked out. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. I stood on the porch. The air was thick, the sky pulsing with a storm that hadn't hit yet. Garrett shoved my suitcase at my feet. "You want to be a grown woman?" he said, voice low and furious. "Then go be one. Out there." He slammed the door. The porch light clicked off, and just like that, I was erased. My heart thundered in my ears as I walked barefoot down the sidewalk, my suitcase trailing behind me like a dying memory. The cicadas screamed in the trees. My back ached. My hands shook. I was sweating through my shirt, and still, I kept moving. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when the first contraction hit. Not when my phone died with no one left in my contacts I could call. Not when I realized I had nowhere to go. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't beg. I didn't fall apart. I became someone else. Someone who had nothing left to lose. Someone who learned that when the people you love slam the door in your face, you don't knock again. You walk into the dark, and you find your own way. The night air clung to my skin like a second layer, thick with heat and the scent of something burnt lingering in the breeze. The further I walked, the darker it got. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting short-lived halos on the cracked pavement beneath my feet. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have a place to sit. My shoes were somewhere in my past, and the soles of my feet had started to sting with every step. I passed the elementary school I used to attend, now just a shadow behind a rusted chain-link fence. The marquee still displayed an outdated summer message. "Have a safe break." It felt like a cruel joke. A car slowed down as it approached. My heart jumped. Maybe someone recognized me. Maybe. The headlights brightened. Then the car sped off without so much as a glance out the window. That wasn't the first one, nor the second. It didn't take long before I realized what I'd become out here. Invisible. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a neighbor. I wasn't even a human being worth rolling a window down for. My belly tightened again. Not enough to be labor, not yet, but enough to make me grab the nearby stop sign for balance. My breath came short. I tried to focus on something, anything, to keep from falling apart. I told myself, just make it to a place with lights. I walked for another 10 minutes before I saw the glowing red and white sign of a small convenience store. Of course it was closed. The metal shutters were down. I slid down the wall until I was sitting, my knees up to my chest, both arms hugging my stomach. A group of teenagers passed on the sidewalk. One of them, boy, maybe 17, glanced at me, laughed under his breath, and muttered something to his friend. "Probably just cracked out," he said loud enough for me to hear. I didn't even have the energy to defend myself. Or cry. Instead, I placed one hand on my stomach and whispered, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to be like this." I didn't know what else to say to her. The world around me moved on like I was already gone. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I hoped maybe Damon would change his mind. Maybe if I just told him I was desperate, that I had nowhere left, he'd... I don't know. Remember, I existed. I dug into my bag and pulled out the only lifeline I had. A burner phone one of Seraphine's exes had given me ages ago, in case Dad ever cut me off. The battery was barely hanging on, but it had just enough juice to send one message. I typed, "I'm alone. No home. 8 months, please." It felt pathetic. It was pathetic, but I sent it anyway. 3 minutes later, his reply came through. "You made your choices. Don't drag me into them. My attorney will contact you if you reach out again. No, are you okay? No, where are you? Not even, is it mine? Just a threat in a suit." My hands trembled, but I didn't drop the phone. I powered it off and shoved it deep into the bottom of my bag, like burying it could somehow erase what he said. I leaned my head back against the cool brick wall and stared up at the power lines stretched across the sky. For a moment, everything blurred, between heat, shame, and exhaustion. That's when I saw someone walking up the sidewalk. I straightened a little, unsure whether to be afraid or hopeful. He looked like he hadn't shaved in weeks, dressed in a denim jacket way too heavy for summer. His eyes met mine, but he didn't flinch or cross the street. He stopped a few feet away. "You okay?" he asked, voice gravelly but soft. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what answer I could give. He opened his backpack and pulled out a lukewarm bottle of water. "Take it," he said, kneeling. You look like you need it more than I do." I stared at him for a moment, then took it. He sat beside me, not too close, not too far, just there. "Name's Lazaro," he offered. "I sleep a few blocks that way, behind St. Mercy Church." My voice cracked as I spoke. "I'm Isla." He nodded, like that was all he needed. "I'll tell the church ladies you're out here," he said. "Sister Camille's got a van. She don't ask questions." I wanted to ask why he was helping me, but the question never left my lips. 10 minutes later, headlights approached. This time, they stopped. An older woman with silver hair and a worn cross around her neck stepped out. Sister Camille. Her face didn't change when she saw me. No judgment, no pity, just action. She wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, helped me into the back seat, and said softly, "Let's get you safe." That was the last thing I remembered before everything faded to black. When I woke, I was in a small room, barely more than a cot, a plastic dresser, and a fan humming in the corner. A warm, floral-scented blanket covered me. Not mine, but clean. Mercy had a scent. Who knew? The door creaked. Sister Camille stepped in, holding a clipboard and a gentle look. "You're at St. Mercy's Women's Shelter," she said. "We don't ask how you got here. We just ask what you need." I blinked back tears and nodded. After she left, I sat in silence for a while, watching the blades of the fan slice through the heat. Eventually, I picked up a shared-use phone from the hall, walked back to my room, and stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. I wasn't going to call anyone, not anymore, but I typed out one more message to Damon anyway. "She's yours. That's all? Goodbye." I didn't wait for a response. I turned the phone off, put it face down on the dresser, and never turned it back on again. I lay back down and placed both hands on my stomach. "All right then, baby girl," I whispered. "It's just you and me. No more waiting. No more hoping someone would rescue me." That was the night I stopped waiting for someone to come save me. There wasn't a light bulb moment. No bolt of energy, no rush of adrenaline. It came in the slow silence of early morning, as I rocked Hope in my arms, her tiny breath puffing against the base of my neck like a reminder that life, somehow, had kept going. The storm had passed, but the weight of everything left in its wake settled in deep. They gave us a corner room at the shelter, a cot, a tiny side table with a Bible and a chipped mug. Most nights, I didn't sleep. Hope's cries were unpredictable, and the women down the hall carried their grief like a second skin, one that creaked and cried out in the dark. That morning, while the others quietly gathered in the kitchen to sip coffee and whisper about job interviews and missed children, I stayed seated on the floor by the window. Hope was finally asleep. I should have rested. Instead, I stared at the sunlight creeping through the cracks in the curtain, wondering if anyone from my family had said my name in the last week. Even in a whisper, even accidentally, I didn't expect a call. But some part of me, the part still bruised from years of quiet hope, wondered if Garrett had regretted it, if Alora had at least looked at my empty chair the next day and felt something more than relief. My chest ached, and not just from nursing. Later that afternoon, Sister Camille walked in with a used phone and handed it to me along with a flyer about applying for WIC and emergency housing aid. She spoke gently, not like I was fragile, but like I'd already fought more than I should have. "You might need this for paperwork," she said. "It's clean and loaded. Just be careful what doors you knock on." I thanked her and waited until she left. The phone was scratched, screen smudged, but it worked. I sat cross-legged on the cot, Hope nestled beside me. Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the email app, wondering if my old account was still active. It was. And right there, near the top, was a notification I hadn't expected to see. "You've been tagged in a photo." I hesitated. That familiar pressure gripped my chest again, the one that came just before bad news. But I clicked anyway. And there she was, Seraphine, my sister, smiling like she owned the sky, in a white dress that sent a jolt through my spine. Not just any dress. My dress, the one I'd saved for, slowly, bit by bit. I'd found it in a small bridal shop in Prairieville, tucked between racks of over-the-top satin monstrosities. It had lace sleeves and a sweetheart neckline. Simple, elegant, me. Damon had helped pick it, said I looked like someone out of a storybook. I'd put half the deposit down with the hope that by the end of the year, we'd set a date. Then everything fell apart. But there she was, Seraphine, twirling in the same gown, laughing, surrounded by roses and people I used to call family. The caption read, "The one who always did it right finally gets her perfect day." I wasn't mentioned, not once. My name wasn't even in the comments, like I'd been erased from the world before anyone had the decency to bury me. I could feel my heartbeat behind my eyes, but no tears came. Not yet. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, then brought it back to life just to stare some more. Seraphine had always been the darling. She followed the rules. She made the grades. She never raised her voice or left her plate unfinished. And I had been the soft one. The one who listened more than I spoke, who colored outside the lines because the margins felt suffocating. And when I found Damon, I'd thought, maybe, just maybe, I'd finally done something right. I closed the app and leaned back against the cold wall. Hope stirred beside me, her tiny fists flexing in sleep. My thoughts drifted back to the day I found that dress. Damon had picked me up in his old blue truck, and we'd driven out of the city to look at wedding boutiques. He'd told me I deserved a dress that made people gasp. I remembered the way he looked at me in the mirror. "You're gonna stop traffic, Isla," he said. "They won't know what hit 'em." He'd kissed the back of my hand and promised, "Whatever happens, we're in this." But that's the thing about promises. Some people say them just to hear themselves talk. My stomach twisted, not from hunger, not from labor, but from betrayal carving its way back to the surface. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't throw the phone across the room like they do in the movies. Instead, I turned it off, face down, and placed it on the table next to the mug that now held dried daisies someone had picked for me the day Hope was born. Then I picked her up. I held her against my chest, her heartbeat syncing with mine, her breath warm and soft against my collarbone. "One day," I whispered to her, "you'll wear your own dress, and no one will take it from you." Hope didn't respond, but she shifted closer, her tiny fingers curling against my shirt. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just holding her, she was holding me too. That was the first night I dreamed about building something just for us. I hadn't planned on sleeping that night, not after what I saw, the dress, the smile, the caption. But sleep came anyway, sometime between Hope's midnight feeding and the soft footsteps of Sister Camille checking the hallway. It wasn't peaceful, just necessary. My body gave out before my thoughts did. Morning came slowly, filtering in through the tiny window like it was reluctant to shine on me. I sat on the edge of the cot, cradling Hope. She was finally asleep, one tiny hand wrapped around my finger like she was afraid I might vanish. There was a rhythm to our days now. Not glamorous, but steady. Diapers, bottles, sponge baths. I washed clothes in the sink and hung them on the curtain rod to dry. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old books, but I had my own corner, and no one asked why I flinched at loud voices. I moved quietly, learned the steps of shelter life like a dance. Wait your turn, keep your eyes soft, your voice low. The other women talked about court dates, parole officers, exes who still had keys to apartments they no longer lived in. One woman said her own daughter wouldn't recognize her in a crowd. I didn't speak much, just nodded when I needed to, held Hope close, and memorized the sound of her breath. That night, after a string of restless hours and a bottle that took too long to warm, Hope refused to go back to sleep. She cried and cried, inconsolable and red-faced, until my arms shook and I wanted to cry with her. I rocked her slowly, whispering lullabies I barely remembered. And then, it just came out of me. "Hope." I whispered it again. "Hope, that's your name." It wasn't planned. I hadn't written it down or prayed on it. It was simply the only thing that made sense. Because even in the dark, especially in the dark, she was the only light I had left. Not a flicker, not a flame, but something steadier. The kind of light that comes after the fire has already burned everything else down. I whispered it one last time into her ear, and she quieted, like maybe she understood that being named meant she belonged to someone. To me. The next morning, I felt strange peace, not happiness, No, that still felt foreign, but something rooted. I dressed Hope in one of the onesies a church group had donated, wrapped her tight, and went to the kitchen where Sister Camille was setting up coffee. She looked up and smiled. "You look more awake this morning." I gave a small shrug. "She has a name now." "Oh?" "Hope," I said. "Her name is Hope." Sister Camille nodded. "A good name. Fitting." She didn't ask why I chose it. She didn't try to attach meaning to it or turn it into a sermon, just accepted it, like I was finally reclaiming something small and sacred. Later that week, Sister Camille found me in the hallway with Hope bundled in my lap. She handed me a wrinkled envelope, folded neatly in half. "Someone dropped this off for you. No name." Inside was $50 in 20s, crisp, clean, and a small slip of lined paper torn from a notebook. In shaky cursive, I knew like my own reflection, it read, "Still your mother. Always." My breath caught. I pressed the note to my chest before folding it and tucking it into the side pocket of Hope's diaper bag. I didn't say anything out loud, but in my head, I whispered, "I knew you didn't forget me." It was a short-lived comfort. 2 days later, I went to the front desk to ask about another package. There wasn't one. I waited. The next day, still nothing. The day after, I approached Sister Camille and asked gently, "Has anything else come?" She hesitated, then said softly, "The donor asked not to be identified anymore." I nodded, but her eyes held the answer I already feared. Garrett had found out. He'd always had a way of silencing people without raising his voice, just a look, a certain shift in posture. I could picture it now. Elora caught holding the envelope, his disappointment like a gavel. Maybe he didn't yell. He didn't have to. He just had to remind her who paid the mortgage. Back in my room, I sat on the cot and looked at the note again. "Still your mother." Past tense, a safe way to say something true without having to argue about it later. I didn't blame her. I wanted to, but I knew what it was like to be too scared to speak, so I spoke differently. That evening, while Hope slept, I took out the little spiral notebook someone had left on the donation table. I started writing, not a journal, not poems, just lists, recipes I remembered from helping Elora bake, the banana bread that didn't taste like sugar, the biscuits with too much butter, but that everyone loved anyway, a few old church cookbook meals we used to make for potlucks, and then I wrote ideas, a stand, a name, a menu, nothing big, just dreams scribbled in pencil, next to formula measurements and diaper brands, because if my own mother couldn't say my name aloud in her own home, I'd find a way to make the world say it for her. I didn't need an inheritance. I didn't need a wedding. I didn't need Garrett to open his door or Seraphine to apologize. But I needed something that couldn't be taken from me, something I built piece by piece with cracked hands and the kind of hunger that comes from being told you don't matter. They wanted me forgotten. So I began building something they couldn't ignore. By the time the sun came up that morning, my fingers were blistered, the air in the kitchen thick with cinnamon and burnt butter. I wasn't baking to calm myself. I was baking to prove something, to no one in particular, maybe not even to myself. But that night, as batter spilled into cupcake trays and dough rose in defiance, something inside me rose too. It started as just an idea, scribbles in the margins of a notebook I used to jot down formula measurements. But within a few weeks, that idea became a plan. Sister Camille mentioned the church's old annex kitchen hadn't been used since before COVID. After a few polite nudges and a very persistent Lazaro, they let me take a look. It was dusty, sure, and smelled like old grease and lemon disinfectant, but it had counters, sinks, and 2 ovens that still worked when you hit them hard enough. To me, it might as well have been a palace. Lazaro helped me clean it out in exchange for leftover muffins and enough coffee to fuel a construction crew. He brought scrap wood and built a little stand to set up on Sundays, just outside the church, under a patch of shade near the corner. I painted the name by hand, Hope's Hearth. I picked the name for 2 reasons. Hope, of course, was the reason I was still breathing. And Hearth, because if I couldn't have a home the way I once dreamed, I'd build a version of it from scratch. one that smelled like vanilla and brown sugar and made people stop when they walked by. Our first Sunday, I showed up with 6 trays of baked goods and not 1 ounce of confidence. The first few customers were polite churchgoers who offered tight smiles and kind lies. "Oh, this is delicious, sweetheart," even when the muffins were underbaked and the glaze too thin. But the second Sunday, I saw one of them come back. And she brought a friend. By the third week, a group of kids had nicknamed my lemon sugar cookies Sunshine Cookies, and people started asking if I'd be there every week. Lazaro printed up little paper menus using a borrowed printer, and I started jotting down customer names in a spiral notebook. For the first time in over a year, people said my name with warmth instead of shame. They said it like I mattered again. I was alive in ways I hadn't felt in ages. Then, one evening, just after I'd closed up, Lazaro came by with his usual scrunched-up face that meant something wasn't right. "Got something you should see," he said, tapping his phone. I took it from him, unsure what I was looking at. The screen lit up with a screenshot, a group text. The header read, "Rhodes Family, Private." The names blurred into a dull ache, but one message stood out, bold and sharp, sent by Garrett. "She's gone. Don't bring her up again. She chose her path. She's dead to this family." My vision didn't blur. My knees didn't buckle. I didn't drop the phone. I just stood there, reading it once, then twice, before handing the phone back. "Thanks," I said quietly. Lazaro didn't press. He never did. He simply nodded and walked back toward his spot near the back lot, where he'd sleep under a tarp and a mattress someone left behind months ago. I returned to the kitchen and tied my apron. The sun was already down, and the windows buzzed with June bugs flinging themselves at the screens. I baked until midnight, not because I had orders, not because I had the energy, but because I had no other way to scream. When the last batch of cookies cooled, I grabbed my notebook and tucked the screenshot into the inside cover. No rage, no dramatic flourish, just a quiet declaration. If I was dead to him, then so be it. But I would not stay buried. By Friday, people had started asking if I could cater birthday parties. Someone asked if I shipped pies. Hope's Hearth wasn't just a table outside church anymore. It was a presence, a rhythm, a hum in the neighborhood. The little kids began waving when they passed by the stand, and even the grumpiest church elders started commenting on the flakiness of my crust. I was still broke, still tired, still reusing parchment paper until it barely held shape. But I was breathing differently. I was someone again. On Sunday, Sister Camille stopped by early. She offered to pray over the stand, but I told her I had something else in mind. I pinned a new sign to the front of the table, written in the same blue marker I used to label Hope's bottles, for the ones they forgot. I didn't explain it. No one asked. And still, by noon, we'd sold out. Later that night, after tucking Hope in with her favorite stuffed bear, I opened my notebook to that screenshot again. I read it one more time. Then I got up, went back to the kitchen, and started a new recipe. That night, I baked as if I were breathing for the first time. By the end of that summer, Hope's Hearth had grown from a Sunday side table to a regular fixture at local markets. We'd started taking small orders for community events, church picnics, school bake sales. Word had gotten around. Not fast, not viral, just steady. The kind of word of mouth that doesn't make headlines, but shows up with a smile and an empty plate every weekend. Lazaro and I hauled our folding tables and crates out every Saturday before the sun broke over the rooftops. Hope, now 2.5, sat nearby in her booster chair coloring with broken crayons or trying to count quarters from the tip jar. She called everyone Miss or Mister, said thank you like she'd invented the phrase, and smiled with her whole face. It felt like we were finally doing it, living, not just surviving. So when a local cafe owner approached me about selling my pastries wholesale, I didn't hesitate. It was a huge step, but I felt ready, confident. I submitted a loan application the same day, thinking about ovens, shelves, a real commercial kitchen, maybe even a proper sign with lights. The rejection email came 3 days later. It wasn't a no. It was a "you're not eligible." My stomach twisted. I reread the message again and again. They hadn't even checked my income. They flagged my credit. I waited until Hope was down for a nap and Lazaro had gone out for coffee to dig deeper. I signed up for a free credit report online and held my breath as the page loaded. There it was, a mortgage loan from 4 years ago. My name on it, my social security number, and a debt still marked delinquent. I stared at the screen like it had slapped me. I'd never bought a house, never even tried. I'd been living in borrowed rooms and corners of borrowed kitchens, but the signature at the bottom, it was forged. I recognized it anyway. It was Garrett's handwriting. My father hadn't just thrown me out, he'd kept me on paper, used my name, used my identity, and left me to take the hit when it went bad. I felt cold, not the kind that makes you shiver, the kind that makes your bones forget how to hold your skin. I printed the report and held it in my hands like a body. I didn't scream, I didn't throw anything. I just sat at the table and stared until the words stopped blurring. That night, after putting Hope to bed, I wrote a letter. Not to the bank, not to a lawyer. To him. I didn't plan to send it. I didn't even sign it. But I needed to get it out. You threw me out, but you kept my name. You cut me from your life, but stitched yourself into mine through the back door. And the worst part? You didn't even think I'd notice, because I was never supposed to grow big enough to look. But I did. I looked. I saw. And now I remember everything you made me forget. I folded the letter, slid it under the notebook where I kept my recipes, and went back to the kitchen. I baked until dawn. The following weekend, we set up early for the neighborhood's Harvest Saturday festival. It was the biggest crowd we'd had all year. Families, kids in matching shirts, booths filled with face paint and kettle corn. I had 3 tables this time, stacked with pecan pies, blueberry bars, and cinnamon rolls iced just an hour before. Hope wore a little red apron with her name on it. She held her own tongs and handed out free cookie samples to anyone who walked by. Everything was going smoothly, until I saw her crying. I had just finished ringing up a customer when I heard the sniffles, sharp, stifled sobs that made my stomach drop before I even turned around. Hope was curled behind one of the tables, arms wrapped around her knees. I knelt beside her. "Baby, what happened?" She wouldn't look at me at first, just pointed to a group of kids walking off laughing. One of the little girls, blonde, maybe 6, looked back at us and whispered something to the boy beside her. He grinned. Hope's voice came out in pieces. She said, "You told them my grandpa died, but I don't have a grandpa. So it's like I don't get to have one." My heart cracked down the middle. I scooped her up and sat with her behind the table, holding her tight while the world kept moving. I wanted to storm over to those kids, find their parents, demand apologies. But I knew better. Kids repeat what they hear, and some people just don't know the damage their silence causes. I kissed Hope's forehead and whispered, "You may not have a grandpa, baby girl, but you've got a whole world of people who love you." She looked up at me, eyes wide, unsure. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm sure." The rest of the day went by in a blur. We sold out by mid-afternoon, but I didn't celebrate. I just kept watching Hope. Watching the way she smiled less, clung more. That night, after she fell asleep with one hand on my arm, I opened my sketchbook and tore out the old logo I'd been working on. I drew a new one. Bold letters, simple font. Hope's Hearth, family is who shows up. The next morning, I printed it on a new sign and nailed it to the front of our table. No explanation, no drama, just truth. People stopped to read it. Some nodded, some smiled. One woman teared up. No one asked questions. And that was the point. Because the next time they tried to erase me, I was already too big to ignore. It was a Monday morning when Seraphine showed up. Mondays were usually quiet for Hope's Hearth. Fewer customers, slower pace, time to prep. I had just finished icing the lemon bars and was restocking the to-go bags when her car pulled into the lot. She parked too carefully, like she wanted everyone to know she'd arrived, but no one to ask why. She stepped out in kitten heels, the kind no one wears to shop for pastries, with sunglasses perched like a crown on her head and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She hadn't visited since I opened the bakery, though I'd caught her name whispered once or twice around town, like someone stirring sugar into bitter coffee, more for habit than sweetness. "I just had to come see it for myself," she said, arms wide like we were old friends and not blood stained with tension. I wiped my hands on my apron and met her halfway across the parking lot. Didn't think Hope's Hearth was your kind of place. Oh, don't be like that, she said, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. You know I've always admired your resilience. There it was, that word, the one people use when they can't decide if they pity you or resent you for still standing. She bought a few items, paid in exact cash, then lingered by the chalkboard sign that Hope had drawn hearts all over the day before. Seraphine tapped her manicured finger against the corner of the table. I told Damon not to string you along, you know. Told him not to mess with your feelings. The words hit me sideways, like a slow punch I didn't see coming. I didn't answer, just kept folding the bakery boxes and letting her words settle like dust in the corners of my mind. You always took things so seriously, she added, almost as an afterthought. Always so sensitive. Then she smiled and walked off like she'd just dropped off a pie and not a landmine. Back inside, I pulled out my recipe notebook and jotted down everything she'd said, verbatim. I didn't know when it would matter, just that it would. That night, as Hope and I cleaned up, she asked me, "Why did Auntie say you cry easy, Mommy?" I paused. The way kids ask questions, it's like they're holding up a mirror and asking if you like what you see. I stirred the batter more than it needed, focused on the lumps that refused to smooth out. Some people don't understand feelings, I said quietly. They think being quiet means being weak. Hope didn't say anything, just nodded and went back to coloring, but the question hung in the air long after she'd gone to bed. 2 mornings later, I came in early to prep for a weekend pre-order. Lazaro was supposed to bring in the fresh eggs, but when I opened the front door, I didn't notice anything wrong at first, until I stepped on glass. Tiny shards scattered across the floor like confetti from a cruel celebration. The front window, my only one, was shattered. In the center of the mess was a rock, wrapped in a scrap of paper. I picked it up slowly, fingers careful around the edges. The note read, "Still pretending to be better than you are?" There was no name. There didn't need to be. For a second, the old feeling came back, the one from the night on the sidewalk, pregnant and alone. That feeling that maybe the world would always find new ways to punish me for daring to exist. But then, I heard a tiny yawn behind me. Hope stood at the doorway in her pajamas, rubbing one eye and holding her stuffed bear by the ear. I put the note down. That window could break 100 more times, but they weren't going to touch her. We spent the next hour sweeping up the glass. Lazaro showed up with duct tape and a make-do plan involving clear plastic and cardboard. I let him take over repairs while I checked the ovens. Later that afternoon, I found Hope sitting behind the counter with her crayons and construction paper, humming to herself. She handed me her newest creation, a drawing of the bakery with a bright red heart in the middle and a word scrawled in giant letters. Home. That was it. Not just a drawing, not just a moment. It was a declaration. I taped her picture above the register. Didn't matter if the window stayed patched or if the rain came through the corners of the tarp. This place was ours. We reopened that evening with plastic still flapping in the wind. People came anyway. Someone brought coffee. Another slipped a 20 in the jar and said, "No change." Nobody asked what happened, but they saw, and they chose to show up. I baked like my life depended on it, not because of spite, but because I knew what it meant now to claim something, to build it even while it cracked beneath your feet. Let them try again. I was done breaking quietly. The morning of the event, I stood in front of the mirror with Hope, both of us dressed in cream. Hers was a cotton dress with sunflower buttons. Mine, a simple linen wrap I'd sewn from fabric someone left at the shelter years ago. She beamed, swaying side to side, her curls pinned with a clip shaped like a teacup. "You look like a cupcake," she said, giggling. "Perfect," I told her. "Let's go shake up the room." The Baton Rouge Community Auditorium wasn't much from the outside. Flat brick, dated sign, weeds poking through the walkway. But inside, it buzzed with camera flashes and echoing greetings, people hugging too tightly and smiling too hard. The kind of room that made you forget how many times you were once left off the list. We were escorted to the side entrance, just near the stage. I held Hope's hand and looked around. Damon was already there, doing his rounds, shaking hands, kissing cheeks, nodding like a man who had just enough power to pretend humility. His voice carried over the soft jazz playing through the sound system. I didn't need to search for Garrett. I could feel him before I saw him. Sitting in the second row, arms crossed, wearing the same navy suit he'd worn to church since I was 10. His eyes scanned the room with that old self-importance. No recognition crossed his face when I walked in. Or maybe he recognized me and chose not to show it. Same difference. Seraphine was there too, laughing with a local news anchor, sipping something fizzy from a plastic flute. Her smile cracked only slightly when she noticed me. It was strange how little it rattled me. Damon took the stage and began his welcome address. He stood tall behind the podium, reading from note cards, occasionally glancing into the crowd like a shepherd over his flock. "And now," he said, voice honeyed, "we honor a woman whose journey embodies what it means to persevere. She's built something beautiful out of dust, and today, we celebrate that." My name was called. Applause. I stood, steadied myself, and took Hope's hand as we walked up the side stairs. The lights hit harder than I expected. My dress stuck to my back in the humidity. My hands, though, were calm. I looked out over the crowd, so many familiar faces. People who had once crossed the street to avoid eye contact, people who said nothing when I vanished from family photos. And yet, here they were, clapping. Damon smiled at me as he stepped back. He mouthed, "Proud of you." I stepped to the mic, paused, took a breath. 3 years ago, I began. I walked out of a house that told me I didn't belong. A shift in the room, silence sharp enough to cut through linen. I was 8 months pregnant, alone, unnamed, unseen. I was told to go survive, without love, without shelter, without my name. Another pause. And I did. Hope stood near the podium, hands folded behind her, watching me with those wide, steady eyes. Today, I stand here with the child they told me to forget, the one they erased in whispers and in group chats, the one they told themselves was better off gone. A few heads turned in the second row. "I won't name them," I continued, "because names are sacred, and I won't give theirs more power than the silence they used to shame me." I could hear phones clicking, someone recording, someone whispering, someone holding their breath. I was not lost, I was hidden, pushed away, buried. My gaze swept the room, landing on Garrett for just a moment. His jaw clenched, but his eyes didn't meet mine. But I grew in that soil. I grew when no one was watching. And now I bloom. Murmurs. A rustle of movement. Seraphine stood and walked out. I let her go. I looked down at Hope and smiled. I built something they couldn't erase. A place, a name, a future. And I did it without asking for permission. Applause rose slowly, then rolled like thunder. Not everyone clapped. Garrett sat still, lips tight. Damon adjusted his tie and looked like he wished he had somewhere to be. But enough people stood. One woman in the back wiped her eyes. Another pressed her hand to her heart. Someone near the aisle whispered loud enough for me to hear. She said what we've all wanted to say. That was enough. I stepped down from the stage and reached for Hope's hand. She leaned in close. "Mommy," she said, "can we go bake now?" I smiled. "Yes, baby. We've fed the soul. Let's feed the belly." We walked out the side door, the same way we came in. No spotlight, no curtain call, just sunlight warming our faces and the scent of yeast and vanilla waiting in my mind like a second skin. I didn't win by destroying them. I won by refusing to stay invisible. That Monday felt quieter than usual, not in the way of a storm past, but more like a deep exhale, a kind of stillness that didn't ask for silence, only respect. The bakery smelled like cardamom and warm flour, and the air outside had the soft chill of late winter yielding to early spring. The kind of morning where the sky glows gold just before the sun lifts above the rooftops, and for a few minutes, the world seems to wait. I'd arrived before sunrise, unlocking the door and stepping into the gentle hush that always greeted me first thing. The ovens blinked to life like old friends waking slowly. Lazaro was already out back, unloading a fresh crate of apples from the orchard up the hill. His movements were methodical, reverent almost, like each apple mattered. Hope was near the front counter, cross-legged on the floor, coloring with a half-dozen worn crayons on the back of a smudged flyer from last month's bake sale. Her curls bounced with every scribble. I tied my apron with slow hands, letting the rhythm of routine settle over me like a favorite quilt. Familiar, warm, stitched together with years of doing and enduring. There were no reporters stationed outside, no curious customers whispering with sideways glances, no passing glances pretending not to recognize me, just the hum of the ovens, the aroma of yeast rising, and the quiet beat of life returning to itself. Peace, I'd learned, doesn't come after you win. It comes after you survive. And I had. The morning rolled on like it always did, slow, deliberate, anchored by regulars who returned not for spectacle, but for scones and sincerity. Mrs. Alvarez came in first, as she always did, wrapped in a coat too big and perfume too bold. She bought a lemon scone and dropped a crisp dollar bill into the tip jar, saying, "For Hope's future college fund," like it was a promise, Mr. Hayes followed, hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, ordering coffee and a cinnamon roll. He'd only started coming after the article had run. His wife, a woman I'd never met, had apparently read it aloud at the breakfast table, then stared him down and said, "That girl's got more spine than you ever did." He started showing up every Monday after that. By noon, someone had left a folded copy of the Baton Rouge Daily on the front counter. I didn't see who. I only noticed it when I went to wipe crumbs from the glass case and caught the headline, "Mother Speaks Truth. Community Listens." I didn't read the full article. I didn't have to. I'd lived it. A few people came by just to say thank you. One woman cried, though she never explained why. Another squeezed my hand and whispered, "We needed that," before slipping out the door with a croissant wrapped in wax paper. I appreciated them all, but I wasn't chasing applause. I was chasing peace. Hope climbed onto her usual stool near the register, legs swinging. Her drawing now glittered from a daycare project someone had dropped off that morning. She looked up at me, eyes wide with a kind of wisdom too big for her years. "Do cupcakes still make people happy?" she asked. I leaned over, brushed a speck of flour from her cheek, and smiled. "They always do." Around mid-morning, the bell above the door chimed again. I looked up, expecting another regular. It was my mother, Elora. She stood in the doorway like someone remembering how to be let in. Her blue cardigan was the same one she'd worn to my first school recital, the one where I sang off key and cried during the second verse. She held a box, brown paper, thin string, nothing fancy. Her eyes looked older now, not tired, not ashamed, just softened, like life had finally shown her how to be still. She didn't ask if I had time, she just walked in. I stepped out from behind the counter, heart suddenly louder than before, but not panicked, just awake. Hope looked between us, unsure if she was seeing a stranger or a ghost. "I didn't know how to stand for you back then," Elora said, placing the box on the counter. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "But I brought what was left of you from home." I opened the package carefully, untying the string with fingers that didn't shake. Inside, folded papers, the kind that had creases from too much time spent tucked away, class photos, a third-place ribbon from a spelling bee I'd nearly forgotten, my old library card, a drawing I'd made in second grade, stick figures and stars. At the bottom, nestled in tissue, was a necklace, my necklace. The heart-shaped pendant Seraphine had thrown on the bed the night they told me to leave. The chain had been broken then. Now it was repaired, mended carefully, like someone had taken the time to make it whole again. I looked up. Elora didn't cry. Neither did I. Hope climbed down from her stool and walked over, small fingers wrapping around mine. She studied Elora carefully before asking, "Are you my grandma?" Elora's eyes glistened. Her voice cracked as she answered, "Yes, I am." I didn't interrupt. I didn't explain. I just let the moment be. Because sometimes healing doesn't come in apologies. It comes in presence. It comes in staying when you once walked away. After Alora left, I slipped the necklace into my apron pocket and turned back toward the kitchen. The oven buzzed. The timer beeped. The next batch of biscuits needed to go in. And somehow, the world kept moving. That night, after we closed, I sat alone at the counter with my notebook, the same one I'd used for everything from muffin recipes to inventory spreadsheets to emergency budgets. At the back, I flipped to a blank page and wrote something I'd been holding inside for far too long. A closing line, a full stop. They thought throwing me away was the end, but I was never trash. I was tinder, and I learned to set light to my own beginning. The bakery was quiet, just the soft hum of the refrigerator. Lazaro asleep in the office, snoring faintly. Hope was curled up under the counter, wrapped in a blanket, a half-eaten cookie still in her hand. I stepped outside, needing air. The sky stretched wide and clear. Stars blinked down, scattered like secrets across navy velvet. I stood for a long while, arms crossed, the necklace warm in my pocket. And I thought about every version of myself I'd buried. Every girl who'd been told she was too much, too loud, too broken, too serious. I had buried them all, so I could become the one standing here now. I smiled, not for the camera, not for forgiveness, not for performance. I smiled because some wounds don't close, but they don't have to. They no longer stop me from dancing in the sun. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with clarity. Isla didn't need to scream or fight to win. She just needed to be seen, heard, and remembered on her own terms. So let me ask you, what does healing look like in your story? Have you ever had to walk away from the people you loved just to find your own peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. And if this family story touched you, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and stay with us for more powerful journeys just like this.